they had, one time they had all the property from Divine all the way to Charlotte. They ran cattle. And then
where was their house before the
their house before that was here, right here in Charlotte, down here. Apartment down here in town, right there by the Methodist Church, this side of the Methodist Church. Dad bought a lot of property here in Charlotte. Back and bought 126 lots in the town of Charlotte when he came here. But he was raised in Bigfoot. There was he had 4 brothers. John was the oldest one. Dad, and then there was Fred, and then Tobe, and then Dad. He had a sister that was the oldest. Her name was Grace, and the youngest one was
So he was doing cattle long before the car dealership.
They came here, as cattle people, raising cattle, but during the Depression, they went broke, and they lost everything. They lost all that property except for the homestead there in Bigfoot, and then from there. The brothers scattered out. Dad and Uncle John continued to run cattle in later years, but Dad moved here to Charlotte and obtained property. And
did the railroad come here then?
The railroad. No, the railroad didn't come in here until 1909. Dad came in here. He had a grocery store, a little grocery store.
Oh, really?
And in competition with his father-in-law, which was a big grocery. But anyway, Dad did everything you can think of. He only had a 6th grade education, because of that time he had to work to help make the family, in which he eventually became the family's financial help, took care of the whole family. But in 1926, he obtained a Chevrolet dealership.
Was it already there?
Automobile. No,
he built it.
He applied for it, through General Motors, and got it. And
it's like a franchise.
And he built a building, and ran that dealership. Dad ran the dealership from 29 through 1946.
Is that when you took it over?
And I came back out of the service in 46. I went in service when I was 17 in 42. And I came back out of service in 46. And Dad kept the dealership open, and I told him I wanted it. He wanted it, and he was wanting out of it, and so when he kept it open till I went back to school for a short period of time, and then
The Shriners?
no, I went to Texas University when I came back. I went to Shriners when I was, before I went to service. But
Were you named after your Uncle John?
huh?
Were you named after your Uncle John?
Probably so.
Your dad's brother?
He stayed with him a lot when he was a little boy.
But there, in our history, there is a John Thompson. And that's where the name comes from.
Okay.
The train came in here in 1909, so.
Where they used to have to drive them to Divine?
Oh no, they wouldn't. In other words, the cattle drives were to Kansas. You know, back before the railroad came in, but we never were participants in that.
But they were taken to the shipping pens and load them in trucks and take them to
There
market.
wasn't any shipping pens until the railroad came in, Mother.
Oh, that's true.
But you'd sell them somewhere more locally, and they'd get driven to Kansas.
Well, they drove
your
to Kansas.
father.
There would be several big ranchers put herds together and drive them to Kansas before there was a railroad. You know, and where there was market. But we weren't. That was back before that time.
These are my ancestors. This is my grandfather. And then these were his family. Yeah. On my mom's side. And,
Where did they live?
they came to Texas from Louisiana. And I don't know where they were before Louisiana. I guess from Holland or somewhere, but I thought they maybe came into South Carolina, but they didn't. They landed in Louisiana, and then they drifted over to Texas from there. But there's Zachariah Martin. What I love about them are their names. James Andrew and James Madison, and they were all named after presidents. I think that's interesting. I guess those are the names that they knew. So, my grandfather they were all cattlemen too. Some of them on a big scale. They raised steers. So you had a whole bunch, and then you sold them as a group, and you raised them. And my grandfather and his brothers, they were, men of means. And then when the banks all went closed, that was in the 30s, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah, in the 30s.
Yeah.
That was the Depression, man. 30.
Yeah, they
It
lost
started in
everything.
29, ended in 33.
Because their money was in the bank, and the banks closed, and so that was the end of it.
And they just lost all that?
Yeah. And my grandmother had already died. She died in the flu epidemic during the First World War. She was just 32 years old.
Wow.
And so.
And where were they in Texas?
They lived in Tilden, and then after my mom's mother died, well, her aunt and uncle took her, and she and her brother, and they lived in Jordan. My grandfather built them a house there, and they took them in, the children, because he lived on the ranch. It was down below Tilden, between Tilden and I guess Alice, somewhere down there. And my mother's brother, Lee, I don't know if y'all know, you never did know him because he died with cancer kind of young, but anyhow, he was in school at the University of Oklahoma, and so when the banks closed, he had to come home because that was the end of the money, and it was a sad thing. So,
how many children did your
There were just
Grandmother
two.
had- Okay.
My grandparents, they had five, but she lost three babies. I go down to the cemetery at Tilden. It's really sad. There's James Walter Martin and Florence Wheeler Martin, and then these five little tombstones, little headstones. She lost all her babies except two. Mother had one brother. But Dad had a bunch of brothers. How many brothers did he have? And three sisters. And they grew up in Christine. And my mother was a Martin, and she married Martin. That's kind of interesting. But they weren't related. So, this lady that did all this, I mean, no point going over all of it, but she's got them all together, the families, and
The family tree work, that's nice.
yeah, she enjoyed doing that sort of thing, putting it all together. So then she gave me a copy of it. But I don't know. Do you have any questions? My father, my dad was a rancher, but he was also a mathematician, and they were always wanting him to be to work in the tax office because he was real good with numbers. So he was a county tax collector for a while, and then after he retired from that, he was a school with tax collector at Jordanton, and that's where we grew up. Mom and Dad lived in Jordanton.
Yeah, I remember their house over there in Jersey.
Yeah.
They had one of those push mowers that didn't have a motor, you know. I'd run around with that as a kid.
They didn't have them. Well, they might have, but they didn't have them where we lived. The Martins, there were a lot of relatives, and there were some relatives in Pearsall. Yeah, Mother had some cousins in their families that lived in Pearsall.
And then how did y'all meet?
Well, we went to school. I think we met at County Meet. We both played tennis, and County Meet's like UIL now. And I think it was over at Jordan, wasn't it? We were playing tennis.
We knew each other before that.
Well, yeah, because we lived
Both
in
of
Charlotte,
us
I lived in
had
Jordan.
relatives that lived in Christine, and we'd go down there in the summertime, you know, and
Ride
but
horses.
we knew each.
Yeah, we
And
knew
then we
of
had-
each other. Yeah.
They had property. Her dad had property between Jordan and Cross, and we had property down at Cross. You know, the ranches were ranches that were in that area close together. Everybody knew everybody.
Yeah.
You know,
Small town.
like that. When I first, as soon as I came back out of the service, there was a man had moved in here from East Texas to get away from the oil field, and he educated Dad about the value of minerals. And in 1946, the man had a lot of money, and back then a man's name was good, you know. And we were playing dominoes with this man and his brother-in-law one night down at their house. They had a big ranch, had a huge ranch down here below Charlotte. And Dad mentioned the fact that there's a piece of property down here that I want to buy. He said, I'm going to go get the financing for it. He said, well, how much is it going to cost you? And Dad told him, said it was going to cost $45,000. And he just stuck his hand across the table and says, I'll let you have $45,000. And they shook hands. And Dad bought the Marion Ranch for $15 an acre, 3,059 acres.
Wow.
With all the minerals.
And then just.
Well, at the time, we held it, we didn't get the minerals for a period of time.
Okay.
But eventually the minerals were, and the executiveship were going to go with the land. And they did eventually. Before there was any drilling of any kind. So, but
now before the current period that we have of the fracking and the drilling, I know there were oil wells there before, but were they near as lucrative as they?
They weren't lucrative hard at all, except for one in the chalk just before the shale came in. But we leased it many times. You know, we leased it for a 3-year period of time, you know, and that'd run out, you know, and then maybe another seismic outfit would come through and they'd do seismic work, you know, and somebody else would come in there and lease it. It wasn't big money, but you know, it helped. But in that, when but after we bought the ranch, we went down into Mexico and we bought 900 Mexico steers and brought them up here and put part of them on that country and part of them on the country down at Cross and part of them in a ranch down at below Fallerton. And we raised those steers. Those steers came over here, costing us $26 or something a head across on this side of the border. And the first batch we sold in about 18 months, and they brought right close to $90 a head, but that was just 300 of them. And then we kept the other 600 for another period of time, and they brought $100 and some odd dollars, and they paid for themselves.
Did you have to cattle drive them up?
No, that was up in the 40s.
Well, how do you truck 900 steers?
You hire every truck that's in South Texas and that you can get.
Wow.
But back then they didn't all but 1920. They didn't.
They were called bobtail trucks.
No, they weren't bobtail. These were trailers, but they only carried those kind of steers. They only carried about 19 or 20 head.
Well, think about how much weight each of them.
But anyway, with those steers actually paid for themselves over that period of time, not counting the lease on the land and you know and stuff like that. But anyway, it worked out. From then forward, that's all we ever did. We did the automobile business, you know, garage business, and but primarily we did cattle. And Dad and I at one time were one of the biggest cattlemen in this part of the country. We ran as many as 2,000 mother cows. Most of it was on leased land, you know, all over South Texas, just wherever we could find a piece of land. Yeah. Most of it was in relatively smaller tracts. We leased one tract of land that had 19,000 acres in it down close to Aguilares. So that's down close to the border. But and had that for some number of years. We ran 500 cows on that one ranch. But that's what we did. We were cattle people, and we did whatever it took to. And as time went on, we maintained the land by just whatever was necessary to do. Dad was a hard worker. Like I told you, his education was shallow, but he's one of the best businessmen that you can imagine. He put things together that you can't believe. But
When did the railroad pull out or close down, approximately?
John,
I've never seen it.
it had to be in the 50s.
Your parents, your mom, when they were little girls, all the new cars, they used to ship them in here on the rail, and then stop down there, just kind of across the street from the garage, and we'd go down there and watch it unload the cars, and that was a big deal for the girls.
Yeah.
There were little things, and they would.
I do remember that. I do remember that little building that used to be there. The train was long. The train was long gone, but there was a little depot or
Yeah, it was
train
called a
stop,
depot.
right.
That was it. Mm-hmm.
in front of Machen's.
But it had to be in the 50s. I don't remember the exact year that.
In the 50s, was Charlotte a pretty nice town?
Yeah, it was. When that first all built boom hit, you couldn't, on Saturday evening, you couldn't walk down the sidewalks. There'd be so many people in town.
Wow.
Because they were rural. It's a rural community, so everybody came to town on Saturday, did their shopping.
In Charlotte.
There were no paved streets. You didn't go anywhere in the rain because you'd get stuck. So,
Well, the highway was built in 1936.
Okay.
Highway came through Charlotte in 1936. But it only went, it was supposed to have gone all the way to Gardendale, which was down. And it didn't get much profile to Scuba. But,
Now, as your father was just, my background is clearly not in cattle or working that. So as he was purchasing different land, and I'm aware of some of these like Crystal City and the Rock House that we no longer have.
well, no.
Did you need that
no,
much property
no,
for
Dad,
more cattle?
Dad didn't buy it. Most of the land that we ran cattle on was leased property. It is not purchased property. And the Rock House and these other places around here, those were places that my mother inherited from her father.
he was a character. Granddad Kaiser.
He was quite a character. He said, "I'm going to retire when I'm 50 years old," and when he was 50 years old, he retired. And he was financially able to retire. He had a grocery store that he moved from over to McGill, which was a little small settlement about 14 or 15, 16 miles east to, be northwest of Charlotte, be kind of west of Charlotte. He moved his grocery store from over there into Charlotte. And
He raised registered Hereford cattle.
he was a cattleman too. He raised good cattle. And so wool, stuff like that. But
When you got your car dealership started, or when your father started the car dealership, did it also have the gas station and the service?
oh yeah,
and
it had,
all at the
well, you bet back then that was the thing about it. You had to have, if you sold an automobile, you had to be able to fill them up
and fix them.
and fix them. Yes, we had a garage, a single building, but
And you just learned all about it.
huh?
You learned how to do all that stuff just by being around your dad's work, and because you knew
Mechanic.
everything to do with cars.
I raised up this picture somewhere. I don't know where it is, in yonder somewhere. Of two little boys standing there, and John Key and I we were dressed just alike. We were about the same size. We were out there beside the grease rack. The grease rack was boards, 2x12s, that you drove up on, got up underneath there, did your oil drain and whatnot on, agreed to them. But we were standing there beside somebody took a picture of us. We were canicking.
Well, I know the residents of Charlotte have appreciated that for a long time. Even after it was not profitable, you were fixing people's cars because what are they going to do? They're
Yeah.
30 miles from another town and their car's broken down.
That's true. And even after the garage got in such disrepair and everything, we had people telling us, or after he had it torn down, oh, we miss it. It's just not like coming to Charlotte anymore.
That
That's
people
been
ask
there
me,
forever.
Don't you miss it? I said, miss it. that I'm so afraid that it's going to
Fall.
Well,
fall
how
on
do you-
somebody.
We all thought it was going to fall on you someday. Cindy especially.
And when I got, when Faustino, I had that one old mechanic, which was he was a good mechanic. And he didn't have any other way of making a living. And so I kept the garage open for many years just for him
Him and his kids.
me and his family, and he made a living there. But when he got, as soon as he got to where he couldn't work, he got sick, I went to hunting somebody that could demolish it. And they took that garage down from 7 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon with big equipment. And I was, hallelujah.
I remember
Johnny-
working there after school. I worked there
We had all
in
that
middle school
property.
and I pumped gas and swept the floor
Yeah,
All that-
just after 3 o'clock or whatever.
You know,
Yeah.
you did.
all that property across the street, like either belonged to me or belonged to my family. And Johnny has parked equipment on it
I know.
for, ever since we tore that garage down. Well, he parked all that equipment over there. He parked it over there. Never charged Johnny a penny.
That's awesome. That's really
And
sweet.
lots of people, not a lot, but several people have wanted to buy it. But the girls don't want to sell it, so it's okay. We don't need the money especially.
I don't want to say I know what's under there.
So anyhow, that's a story,
But
John.
anyway.
When was First Baptist built approximately? Was that here before you?
This building
Yeah.
wasn't, no.
Yeah, there was a Methodist church built first, and it was built right there where this one is there now. My grandfather, mother's father, they lived in a house right there across the street from that Methodist church, and the Baptist church was built after that. I didn't know when it was.
I don't know when it was built.
Well, when was the centennial?
36.
What was it, 100-year?
No, it was in January. You mean for our church?
Yeah.
It was last January.
Last January. So
Not this
2013.
January, a year.
No, 2014. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it must have been
Mhm.
1914.
It was built in January 100. Last year was
Last year was 19, and so.
no, last year, darn it, was
2014.
Yeah,
14.
right, you're right.
14.
So it's been there a long
100
time.
years,
Okay.
it's built 100 years.
And what about Ike?
What about that?
Ike, oh,
He works
yeah.
for you, right?
He's a part of our family history, yeah.
Ike was a colored man that worked for us he started to work for my dad in 1938. And I buried him.
How old was he when he started working for your dad?
He was, I really don't know. And I don't think I knew how old he was.
Yeah.
He knew approximately. But Ike was raised over at Floresville.
Okay.
And he came and wanted to work for Dad. Asked Dad for a job. Dad hired him. And he put him down there at ranch at Hamilton. I mean at Cross. And he worked for us all over there before. We moved him and finally moved him up here, the green booth. And when he got real sick, had to go in a rest home. And I put him in the rest home.
He worked for y'all. Did y'all ever get...
In Floresville, because that's where he was raised. And he thought those people over there would, come visit him. I had him here in Pleasant first, and I was going to see him every 2 or 3, not every day, but just every couple of days. I'd drop in and talk to him and visit with him. But anyway, he wanted to move with him, so I moved over to Floresville. And, but anyway, I finally passed away.
How long ago was that?
It's been a number of years.
Yeah.
It's been a number of years, actually. But I came to know the Lord. And Harrison down there had a big ranch. He was a wealthy man. He came and asked Dad if he could hire Ike. He needed him. He said, I can pay him a whole lot more and give him a whole lot better deal. So he took him for a while, and Ike got hurt. He got a shoulder hurt. He had an insurance claim, and so their insurance wouldn't cover him. So they took his saddle away from him and put him around just feeding quail. And I called and told us this. He used a few explicit words about them taking his saddle away from him. And said, "Can I come back and will you buy me a saddle and let me pay for it? So it'll be mine." Said, "I don't want anybody to ever take my saddle away from me again." And I said, "Yes, and it wasn't very long before he was there at the garage. And I said, "Well, a few days we'll go up to San Antonio and buy your saddle." He said, "No." I said, "We'll go today." And we went today. And
You've been missing his horse.
I had him a saddle made. And nobody ever took it away from him. Ike was quite a character, but he was a fine man.
He was a fine gentleman.
He was a fine man. He was absolutely. If Ike told you something, you could believe it.
He liked girls. Yeah, he liked it. I mean, our girls.
Oh, okay.
He liked other girls too. He had girlfriends.
Yeah.
He was always nice to us boys. He's just a kind man. You could tell he'd had a hard life. He had missing fingers and stuff.
Yeah.
But he was a kind man.
He didn't have hardly any full fingers.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
But he was quite he was he's good a cowhand. I never knew one a better cowhand than I.
He got Cowboy of the Year over at Pleasanton. They elected somebody from the county. Yeah, he got it one year.
That's awesome.
And the news it got in some magazine somewhere, and they got on
the Today Show.
Today Show in New York.
And they came down and took pictures.
They came down and made a movie down at the Marion.
Really?
We gathered a bunch of cattle, and put Ike up there in the front, leading those cattle, moving around. We drove those cattle around and around up in some fairly open country. And then we went in the pen and he worked cattle. He threw some calves and he marked and vaccinated.
And the Today Show.
Yeah,
castrated.
it was on the Today Show.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. That's awesome.
Of course, they cut out most of it, but
Well, yeah.
Well, they cut out the.
They used some of it, yeah.
That's crazy.
But anyway, he was. I was.
Big time.
Mm-hmm.
Did he have a last name?
Huh?
Did he?
Barnes.
Isaac Barnes.
Isaac Barnes.
B-A-R-N-E-S, Barnes. Mm-hmm.
He was
It's dripping out there.
but we had.
Mm-hmm.
But the main thing, the Lord has been with this family. When Bible Study Fellowship came to San Antonio, Ann started. And in a year's time, I knew I had to do it, and I started. And from there forward, both of us, I fell in love with the Word, and Ann had already, long before had, before Bible Study Fellowship. And it had passed down through the family, and we still have children and grandchildren that are going to Bible Study Fellowship today.
Well, they're serving the Lord. That's the main
And they're
thing.
all
They're involved in ministry, and that's what it's all about.
We have been so blessed. You're part of it, actually. That you
And John, all of you are.
every one of you, but it's just and God didn't have to
What is
continue
that?
to bless the family.
There's a hymn that says, and the story goes on, and it goes on, and it does.
I always think about, I told y'all this at your birthday, but I always think about always going into y'all's room and one of y'all being on your knees praying for us, and just praying for your family, and that's such a, it's blessed us,
It's not what it actually it's not what we've done. It's what God has done and continues to do every day. And it's
So, John, do you have any more questions?
Gran doesn't like the awkward.
I think we pretty well covered it.
I want to ask real quick, can I ask about, how did y'all have told me this before, but how did y'all start dating, or how did y'all
I thought
get
you
together?
asked that a while ago.
Well, I asked how y'all knew each other.
Yeah.
But when did you ask her on a date, or did she ask you out?
Yeah. No, he asked
Yeah.
me out.
No, she asked me out first.
I had a friend over at Jordan that had a car. It was, it was doing for the war, and gas was rationed, and cars too, for that matter. Tires, you couldn't buy tires or anything. And but she had a car, and so we would ride around, and we'd come to Charlotte, and we saw John is typical. His dad had him working. He was shoveling corn or
I was
something.
down here. There was a grist mill down here. Do you know what a grist mill is?
Mm-mm.
Well, you ear corn. You shove it into that truck was back, bobtail truck loaded with corn. We backed up to a window there and you just shoved it through that window into that mill.
Okay.
And I was standing in there with one of the big old shovels, and shoving that through that window, and I was stripped down to the waist, and I've been doing that for some time, and I just covered with that old dirt and dust, and they drive up. They would drive up beside there and invite me to a party there for fixing.
Yeah.
And they have over in Jordan.
We used to have parties, you know, because that's the only way we have to get together. And we played games. I can remember just having the whole room full at our house. And
We were
we would invite Charlotte
14 years old.
So anyhow,
Driving around.
yeah.
We were 14 years old.
So she invited you to a party.
And this is
Yeah.
before the war.
And
Invited him to a party.
How long did y'all date before you got married?
Well, see,
from that time forward,
From 14?
off and on, and then the war came along, and Dad joined. We went off to college, and I went to
Mary Baylor.
what I said when the war was over. I went to college, and he went to war. You know,
Okay.
he was going to get drafted. Every boy in my high school graduating class got drafted.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have any choice. There was a bus waiting down there at the courthouse in Jordan, and they picked you up and you went. So John joined the Marines, and so then when the war was over and he came back, I wasn't quite ready to get married because I was going to finish college, but Dad was ready to get married, and that was it. So we got married. So
Were you living up there at Mary Hardin Baylor then,
Yeah.
I guess?
yeah, we would come home. See, we didn't have Mother and Dad couldn't come and get us because they didn't have any tires on the car. You couldn't buy tires. So we would ride the train. There was a train that went right by the college. So we didn't come home. We came home at Christmas and in the summer, and that was it. So if you were homesick, tough.
Yeah.
But my sister was there.
Okay.
When I went, I don't know, I guess she got homesick, but so that was a help to me, because she was 2 years ahead of me, so.
And then y'all moved to Austin, right?
After we married, we moved to Austin, because Dad was in school at the university.
Right.
But we just stayed there the rest of that year, and then he transferred to A&I at Kingsville.
Okay.
And we lived down there for a year, and then he was ready to come back and take over the garage, so.
Okay. Because our first apartment was close to where they lived in Austin.
Really?
I think. What was
Yeah.
the street that y'all lived on in Austin?
I don't even remember
You told me one time. I forget.
where we lived.
It was
Bowden Avenue.
What was it?
Bolden.
Bolin.
Bolden.
Bolden Creek. Yes, Bolden
Bolden
Avenue.
Avenue. It's the 2nd Street.
That's right. That's real close to where our first
It's
apartment
the
was.
2nd Street West. I mean, yeah,
Anyhow.
from the university it goes across the river. You know,
Right.
We were in the 19th block,
That's great.
west, south of the river.
And was it about that time that you told your dad you wanted to buy him out of the garage? Pretty near after the
No,
war?
I told him when I came back.
Right, when you got back.
But he knew because he was ready to get out. But he told me, see, there wasn't any car paid for people's consumption from 42 to 46. So he was there just in limbo. All he was doing was working on automobiles, and you couldn't get the parts that you needed hardly. Just barely, you know, the garage wasn't making it.
What about gas? Could he get gas? Or was that too
No,
ration?
The
Gas
gas
was
ration. But anyway, he just held it together till I came back, because I told him I wanted it.
And you know, you think, oh, those were bad years, everything was rationed, but I am so grateful that I lived during that period, during that war, and learned so many valuable life lessons. And everybody was in the same boat. Everybody was just helping everybody. It was just a whole different attitude. And so I'll always be grateful that was the time that I was living and growing up.
You know, it didn't make any difference whether people had a lot of money or didn't have.
Because nobody did. We
Didn't
went
have a
to
dime.
college and lived
Because there was nothing available.
I lived
there
in
was
the best
absolutely nothing
dormitory,
available.
and I mean, we were certainly not people of means, but it was just that everybody was kind of on the same level. You know, you didn't have I don't know.
Well, you mentioned to me before, Grant, it was probably better here in the South. I mean, there was agriculture,
Yes.
there's deer, there's
Yes.
there's
And gardens.
people growing things.
Sure. It wasn't. We didn't know anything about the bread lines and the people homeless and stuff in the east and the north, because we didn't have that in the south.
Well, our family, of course, our family had cattle in it. You know, we butchered our own cattle.
Yeah, at least
We had beef.
Yeah.
We raised hogs.
So
That,
People hunt deer like they do now?
huh?
Did they hunt deer like they do now?
No. They were just deer, period. And nobody leased out property. And
but y'all hunted deer.
we hunted deer,
Okay.
but not, no, there wasn't any high fences, and nobody leased out their land
Okay.
back then for
Nobody managed
the
the deer
hunters.
population.
They take friends in and whatnot, or they let people hunt if they wanted to, but
You might see a deer, you might, yeah.
yeah. But there wasn't very many deer. In all honesty, until the government initiated this screwworm program, I'd say that probably 50% of your farm crop or more died. With anything that had any blood on it, screwworm, they ate it up.
Granddad, tell me if you remember the story of your dad used to send you out on horseback to the Marion to shoot rabbits, and
No.
he'd pay you back.
No, that was my granddad. That was Ann's my mother's father. He had a place right down here below the other side of all that land from the football field all down. And he'd plant oak patches. And my grandmother would take me, I had a single shot 22. And she'd take me down there after school, let me out. And my granddad would pay me 50 cents for a pair of ears, but I had to have a pair. He didn't trust me. But I had to buy my own ammunition. But I bought them from him. I bought the shells from him there at the store. And he could charge me for 20 cents for 50. Yeah.
Why were you killing the rabbits? Because they were eating the oats?
Yeah. It was more than one thing, Mother. It was something. Granddad was always making character. You know, you worked. You were doing something to earn, spending money. And whatever I made, you know, I could spend it on anything I wanted to. And that box of shells would kill quite a few rabbits. I didn't miss very many. I lay down in that.
You'd say you'd come back and you had the math all worked out that you could come home and get a Coke and another box of shells and
And then some. Or over with. But anyway.
His grandparents were very foolish about him, and he wouldn't want to go home at night to stay. He'd want to stay there, so they'd give him a can of sardines to get him. He loved sardines, and Granny would give him a can of this is what I've been told. I wasn't there, but that she would give him a can of sardines, and he'd go home happy.
well, Gran, you gave us Apple Jacks and Fruit Loops. That was your thing.
Everybody has their own thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
Somehow,
And according to Jamie, you got to eat out of the molasses jar.
Somehow it was better to watch cartoons at Gran's house than at home. I don't know.
So she had a big pillow thing. They had a trunk. Everybody had a trunk because you didn't have closets much, and you had to store stuff in trunks. So she put that big thing on top of that trunk, and that's where he slept. So anyhow, I've been told all this. I don't know. So he just didn't want to ever go home.
Any other good stories you guys think of?
I think we thought of a bunch.
You have. So much was different then. I mean, your generation, everybody knows your generation works harder than our generation. There's no question. And the things you guys have, it's from life experience and the things you guys have been through. And
yeah, it was quite different.
I think that garage wasn't making you $3,000 or $5,000 a year for years, and
No.
yet, you know, that's what you were going to do. You were going to keep fixing people's cars because they needed it. There was a line of people that had broken down
That's right.
15-year-old junker cars, and
That's right.
and what else are they going to do? They're in Charlotte.
You couldn't buy a new car for so many years during the war and after before they got enough to go around. I can remember that they'd order a car and it wouldn't come, and people would get upset.
There was quite a few dealerships that were started right after the war. And we never did do it. But a lot of those dealerships that were started after the war, they would sell a car for whatever the window sticker was. But they would tell the little boys to lay $1,000 in cash under the table.
And that's because they could get them, and there was still a limited supply.
These people weren't getting maybe 2 or 3 cars. Some of them just 1 car a month for several months after. And that went on for a year or two. And a lot of those dealers that opened up, that's the way they did it. In other words, and cars were selling back then, you know, for, you can't imagine in proportion. The first car I sold was the full 2-door sedan fully equipped, $940.
A new car?
Brand new car.
Oh my gosh.
So, you know, a lot of those dealerships went the belly up immediately after the war because people remembered that. You know,
They weren't happy about getting ripped off like that.
You know,
Sure.
they say, you know, that if he's that crooked, he'll do anything else. You know, his word's not what good. And like I say, like I said, a man's handshake was his word. And if it was good, it was good anywhere.
And if it wasn't
And if
good,
it wasn't good, it wasn't good anywhere. But there was a lot of those dealerships. We had one here that came in here and put in a Ford dealership. And what as soon as they automobiles started getting plentiful, he sat over there looking down the street. There's nobody going in.
But then later, some people started Ford dealerships.
Well, yeah, they bought him out, and the Ford dealership went all right, but it wasn't the dealership, the Ford people. It was him, and because of his dishonesty, people did, you know, they remembered.
That was here in town. There was another dealership.
Mm-hmm.
Where was that?
It's right there where the bus,
Where the red light
those
is.
buses, where those buses are,
School buses, that's right.
in there.
any stories you want to tell about my mom?
Huh?
Oh yeah, Cindy stories.
You want to get on record? Stories we can use against her?
Oh, they like to ride horseback when they were little. And maybe they still do, I don't know. But, and so John usually kept a horse or two. We lived well, you know, where we lived in that greenhouse over there.
Mhm.
And so all this was just a field.
There's 20 acres up there.
And Dad had a barn and a pen, because his dad raised horses. And, well, not on a big scale, but he always had one or two, and so he kept those horses up here some too. But the girls liked to ride, and so they would ride, they'd get on here and go down to the Green Booth, which is down on the road to Jan on 97,
Mhm.
down there where Mandy and Terry lived,
Okay.
Kathleen Thompson. But they didn't get out on the highway, they went through the fields, there were some gates, you know. And they would pack a little lunch, and sometimes they would take something like some Vienna sausage and a little can of pork and beans and build a fire and cook their meal.
That's cute.
And, you know, nowadays you wouldn't think of letting children do that.
How old were they then?
Oh, I don't know. They weren't very old. They were probably in junior high, maybe
Mhm.
10 or 12 or
Yeah.
14, but they weren't in high school. And by the time they got in high school, that was not their thing. But they said they had some great times. And sometimes there would be Jan, and then sometimes Carolyn would be here. And so they would ride through the fields. It was a big adventure. They liked to do that.
That's cool.
Or they would go down here to this little creek, and they just played all over this end of town. So you didn't worry
Different
about
world,
it.
yeah.
because,
So
yeah.
different. Well, it's like when the kids got to the ranch, you know.
Mhm.
Our city kids.
That's enough.
And they all got to learn to drive real early because we always had good cars, and they didn't have any problem with that.